Welcome to Mid-Century Living, your weekly nostalgia podcast about the best of technology and culture from the mid-20th century.
Welcome to episode 31 of Mid-Century Living, the show where we talk all about the best of the mid-20th century and how to add the vintage vibes to your modern lives. We are your hosts, Gonzalo
and Jackie. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're staying in the 70s one more week and talking about the original Star Wars from 1977. But first, Gonzalo, how was your week?
My week was good. I had a very funny interaction with our local camera shop because I have this old digital DSLR. I guess I shouldn't say digital because the D in DSLR is digital. But anyway, it's a Pentax, which if anybody that's listening knows cameras, you know that they don't exist anymore. But I have like the camera and I've got like 3 lenses for it and I got extra batteries and I never use it because it's just so big and heavy that I can't take it with me anywhere. So I was like, I'm going to replace it because I got some trips coming this summer and I want a new camera. And I was like, I'll get a quote. Surely this thing is worth a couple $100 and I can get like, if I get $200 for this thing, then I can use that $200 for a new camera. So anyway, I fill out the quote. I'm on the phone with them. They're like talking, blah, blah, blah. And they go, well, I wouldn't make a trip down here specifically for this device. And I go, why? And they go, well, it'll probably be about $50. So now I have an extra camera and I still want to buy the other one. And if you were to look at my Google Chrome right now on my computer, there's 17 open tabs and they're all different reviews of the camera that I want to buy.
I research like that whenever I want to buy something too, so that's normal.
Yeah.
That's awesome that they'll even give you $50 for a camera they don't make anymore, honestly.
I know, that's what I after the like laughter happened, I was like, oh, this is $50. But then I was like, for $50, I might as well keep it. It doesn't cover the tax on the new device.
I mean, at least then it's not in your house anymore, unless you're still using it.
I'm not still using it, but it's not like in the way. It's in a cupboard.
I don't know. I've been actually trying to figure out. I know that there are things you can do, but like I have like old technology that I'm not using, but I don't know how to throw it out because there's like data on it, and I also don't know where you throw out a laptop.
So there are places that are recycling technology.
Oh, okay.
And they'll take all that. What I would do, and I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm old and cranky, I would like grab your say they have a computer, right? And you don't want to like recycle the computer because it's got data in the hard drive. Grab the hard drive, go to your backyard, grab a hammer, and go to town.
That does sound fun. Unfortunately, I have only Apple devices and I don't know how to get the hard drive out. I bet that can be Googled though.
Probably.
I could actually go full NBC drama and like destroy it with a drill. You know how they do the drill with the hard drive thing?
Yeah.
I bet that would work and be satisfying. I should buy safety goggles.
Yes, definitely wear safety goggles. But anyway, that was my week.
I would take the $50 is what I'm saying. That was the long story.
Well, how was your week? Let's just jump to that one.
Currently, while we're recording, we are halfway to Halloween, so I am treating myself to like a miniature Halloween weekend, and I'm wearing a Halloween outfit, and I'm making Halloween snacks, and gonna watch Beetlejuice later. So I'm just having a very good weekend. I also decided, and this will transition us into the inspiration for this episode, that instead of wearing the exact same outfit I wear every year on May the 4th, I'm going to make like a little Stormtrooper Disney bound to go with my Stormtrooper earrings, which are the only bit of Star Wars merch that I have. So I have to make a bolero later this weekend so that I have something that I can wear it next weekend. But yeah, things are good. Trying to get my sewing mojo back. And I think a bolero is a nice, easy, small, I can do this in an hour, like bit of sewing project to get my
inspiration back.
Yeah, it's just like I have a lot of sewing ideas, but none of them are so compelling that I just want to sit down and make them. It's just more like, oh, that would be cute to have. But then when I sit there and think about the process of putting it together, I don't want to.
I feel the way about drawing sometimes. Like, oh, I would really cool to. I would like. I want to get this. I want to do this, and then I go, but work.
It's just the problem with sewing is that you're not really sewing for most of the time. You're mostly on the floor cutting stuff out, tracing things, pinning things, ironing things, troubleshooting your machine, figuring out why the thread isn't doing like why your tension's off for no reason because you blah blah blah, like, oh, is my needle too dull? Like, it's a lot of troubleshooting and getting on the floor, off the floor, on the floor, off the floor, on the ironing board, off the ironing board, and then at the end you have a dress. But like, that's what sewing is like. And I just like, when I have a really good idea, that whole process flies by and I'm just like, it's like all of a sudden it's like one of those montages in a movie where like all of this stuff is just happening with great catchy background music, and then you have this like beautiful thing at the end. But then if you don't really want to do that, like, I have no idea in mind that I'm so enthralled by that process is sounding good to me yet, except for this bolero, because I know I can pull it together in an hour, and then it'll enable me to be a stormtrooper next week, so that's worth it.
Hopefully, you get your Valero made, and hopefully, I buy my camera, because if I get my camera, the camera I want, I can use my lenses from my 1977
Yay! They're compatible?
Pentax.
That's neat.
There's an adapter you have to purchase for an extra fee.
Worth it. That's cool.
But 1970s.
Yay! Well, speaking of
1970s, maybe we should get back to our podcast episode.
Indeed, let's get on with the show.
Jackie, we are releasing this episode on the eve of Star Wars Day. So may the 4th be with us as we talk about today's episode.
Yes.
You like my joke?
I do. I love that joke. That joke never gets old. So, as you mentioned, we're recording this episode specifically because our episode is coming out so close to May the 4th. So this is a little bit of a stretch timeline-wise for the mid-century, but the original Star Wars, we've decided it'll just be another 70s rule breaker episode. So we're going to try to focus mainly on the original Star Wars movie from 1977, so we're as close to the mid-century as possible.
Yep. But how did it all begin?
So, actually, George Lucas had the idea for a space opera as early as 1971. His original plan was to adapt the Flash Gordon space adventure comics and serials into films, having been fascinated with them since he was young, but someone else already owned the rights to it. And then he took his science fantasy concept and kind of began developing what he would later call a space fantasy. He started writing a 13-page treatment called The Star Wars on April 17th, 1973. He later explained that Star Wars is not a story about the future, but rather a fantasy that has more in common with the Brothers Grimm than 2001: A Space Odyssey. He said he hoped it would offer the romance, the adventure, and the fun that used to be in practically every movie.
Yep. And many studios were impressed with the, quote, innocence of the story and the sophistication of Lucas' fictional world, end quote. But it was rejected for several reasons. So it was too ambitious. Many studios doubted that Lucas would be able to execute his vision. And there was a low opinion and slow popularity of science fiction at the time. Star Wars was finally accepted by 20th Century Fox, June 1973. Studio president Alan Ladd Jr. did not grasp the technical side of the project, but believed in Lucas' talent. Lucas later stated that Ladd invested in him, not in the film, and Fox gave Lucas a $150,000 deal to write and direct the film. In August 1973, after his film American Graffiti opened to massive success, Lucas got the necessary leverage to renegotiate the deal and gain control of merchandising and sequel rights.
That's good. Yeah, I'm sure having a successful film under his belt wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, but also how, like, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like the foresight to, like, renegotiate the deal so that he controls merchandising.
Yeah, at the time. You always hear all those sad stories of people who didn't think about that at the time, and then the movie's super successful and they're missing all this money because their original deal wasn't good.
I know, right? So I'm gonna take a stand right now and see and here say that Jackie and I both own the rights to merchandising for MCL podcast from now until perpetuity.
Yes. Including if it's ever streamed on Netflix. That counts.
Yes.
Or whatever. So anyway, now it's finally time for Lucas to actually write the screenplay. So he wrote 4 different screenplays for Star Wars, searching for just the right ingredients, characters, and storyline. It was 4 drafts over 2 years before settling on the final screenplay for Star Wars. Some funny differences in the earlier drafts. This is just like the greatest hits of what was weird about his earlier drafts, like knowing where the story ends up. I just thought these were funny. So at the beginning, Anakin's last name was Starkiller, and he started out as a general and the hero of the story. Lucas originally envisioned Han Solo as a large green-skinned monster with gills.
Oh.
He based Chewbacca on his dog, Indiana, who often acted as co-pilot by sitting in the passenger seat of his car. The dog's name actually later was given to the character Indiana Jones. And the title of the movie also changed with each draft. The longest and worst working title he had for one of his drafts was, quote, The Adventures of Luke Starkiller as taken from the Journal of the Whills, Saga 1 Star Wars.
Oh, thank goodness they shortened that.
So, at some point during the writing process, Lucas wrote a version of the screenplay that was 250 to 300 pages long, which outlined the entire plot of the original trilogy, but he realized it was too lengthy for a single film, and that's when he decided to spread the story over 3 films. February 27, 1975, Fox granted the film a budget of $5 million, which was later increased to $8.25 million. Lucas then started writing with a budget in mind and reduced the number of complex special effects shots called for by the script. And he finally finished the screenplay March 1976.
So those 5 million, that's about $29 million in today's money. Today being 2024, so
Interesting.
Quite a bit amount of money for Fox to give Lucas.
Yes.
Also, as a side note, do you think that he called his main character Luke because his name is Lucas?
I don't know, but maybe.
I don't know.
I actually cut this part out of this section because I feel like we were going to run long, but apparently how he started his writing process is he just started listing a bunch of weird names for stuff. Like he just started writing down funny names for things, which reminded me a little bit of J.K. Rowling's writing process.
I was just gonna say, wasn't that how J.K. Rowling came up with like names for her series?
Yes, like I think she just like throughout life, anytime she came across a name in reading that she thought sounded fun or interesting, she would just write it down, and then whenever she was writing and needed a name for a character or a magical creature, she would like pull from that her notes. But apparently that's how Lucas started writing too, so I thought that was really interesting. And a lot of those names did end up being used for characters or creatures throughout all 9 movies. So
Cool.
But now that we've got a script, it's time for casting. So
Yeah. So Lucas had a preference for casting unknown actors, which is why he went with Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher for leading roles. He actually initially resisted casting Harrison Ford as Han, since he was in American Graffiti and was not unknown enough. But Ford won him over in the end. I wonder what he did.
Yeah, I wonder what he did.
Yeah. Lucas did admit that he needed an established star to play Obi-Wan for the, quote, stability and gravitas, end quote. Lucas credited Alec Guinness with inspiring the cast and crew to work harder, saying that he contributed significantly to the completion of filming.
That's nice.
Kenny Baker, who played R2-D2, and Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca, were cast largely due to their heights, 3'8" and 7'3", respectively. David Prowse was originally offered the role of Chewbacca, but turned it down as he wanted to play the villain. Prowse portrayed Vader physically, but Lucas felt his West Country English accent was inappropriate for the character, and selected James Earl Jones for Vader's voice.
Which was a perfect decision.
Yes, I cannot think of any other voice apart from his.
Mm-hmm. Similarly to how Lucas decided he wanted unknown characters or unknown actors to be the main characters, he also did not want anything in Star Wars to stand out in the sets or the props, and he wanted everything to look real and used. He called this a used future aesthetic. Lucas believed that this aesthetic would lend credibility to the film's fictional places. They ended up building 30 sets and using 10 sound stages to make this movie, as well as filming on location in Tunisia and Guatemala. The Millennium Falcon set was the most difficult to build. He wanted the interior of the ship to look like a submarine and actually used inexpensive airplane scrap metal to achieve the desired effect.
Interesting that he went with airplane scrap metal to make it look like a submarine.
Yeah, you'd think maybe there's just not as much submarine scrap metal.
But yeah, I would imagine that there's a lot more government-owned submarines than government-owned planes.
Yeah, they probably just, you're right, like just go find some private airplane, like dumpster.
Yeah.
Go grab some pieces. After finding out that Fox's visual effects department had been shut down, Lucas actually had to found his own visual effects company to work on the film. He ended up calling it Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM. Most of the visual effects used pioneering digital motion control photography, which used small models and slowly moving cameras to give the illusion of size. Lucas was very involved in all aspects of production. At one point, the project became so demanding that Lucas was diagnosed with hypertension and exhaustion. Post-production was equally stressful due to increasing pressure from the studio. Another obstacle arose when Mark Hamill's face became visibly scarred after a car accident, which restricted reshoots featuring Luke. Star Wars was originally slated for release on December 25th, 1976, but production delays pushed it back to mid-1977. ILM was struggling to achieve the unprecedented special effects. The company had spent half its budget on 4 shots that Lucas decided were ultimately unacceptable. With hundreds of shots remaining, ILM was forced to finish a year's work in 6 months.
Whoa.
Star Wars was
That's a tight deadline.
completed. Yeah, I know, like, how stressful. Star Wars was completed less than a week before its release date, with all of the film's elements coming together just in time. Lucas described the work not so much as finished, but abandoned. So, after all that, he wasn't even happy with it.
Well, they say that, project's never finished.
Yeah.
Right? If you're the person in charge of the project, you're always going to find something that you could improve or add to. So,
and yeah, I mean, spoiler alert for the future, but you can tell he still feels that way, that the movie was not done based on some changes he made later. But Star Wars began production with a budget of $8 million, but the final budget was $11 million.
yeah. So originally, like you said, the 5 million became 8, and the final budget of 11 is actually almost 64 million today.
I mean, still pretty cheap for a movie.
Yeah.
It's amazing that what they were able to pull off with that amount of money, actually, really.
It really is. So they complete Star Wars, and a week later they release. Lucas wanted the film released in May on Memorial Day weekend. According to Fox executive Gareth Wigan, quote, nobody had ever opened a summer film before school was out. Lucas, however, hoped the school term release would build word-of-mouth publicity among children.
Super smart idea.
Yeah. Star Wars debuted on Wednesday, May 25th, 1977, in 32 theaters and was an immediate success. The film immediately broke box office records. It earned over $2.5 million in its first 6 days, which is about $12.9 million in 2024 dollars. Wow. 3 weeks after it opened, Fox's stock price had doubled to a record high. Lucas instantly became very wealthy. Cast members became household names, and even technical crew members, such as the model makers, were asked for autographs, which I think is really cool because being a former techie, it's like, yay, us.
Yay, behind the scenes. Yeah, I love that they even got some credit for that.
Yeah. By the end of summer, Star Wars was playing in 1,096 theaters in the United States. Approximately 60 theaters played the film continuously for over a year.
Awesome.
Yeah. Here's 2 memories from friends who were kids when Star Wars came out. Quote, I was 6 years old in first grade when it came out, and by that age I was already very interested in space exploration, so a movie about space was a big deal. I remember seeing Star Wars in theater with my dad and big brother. It was mind-blowingly real to us, with space battles and ship fights that looked amazing and so far beyond any big screen effects we had ever seen. The opening battle scene where Vader's ship overtakes the transport Leia is on was breathtaking. Nothing like that had ever been seen. Seeing R2-D2 and C-3PO was a big thrill for us kids, but even the adults seemed impressed because of all the past TV show or movie robots always seemed so fake compared to these. It was all kids at school would talk about or pretend to play in recess. The kids that could afford it, i.e., not me, had Star Wars lunchboxes and Ringer t-shirts. We all collected the action figures and little die-cast or plastic ships, the Y-Wing fighters, X-Wing fighters, TIE fighters, the Millennium Falcon, Imperial cruisers. A new Star Wars installment came out every 3 years, Empire Strikes Back in 1980 and Return of the Jedi in 1983, and the excitement all that time never abated. It was just constant Star Wars buzz for a decade.
That sounds very cool.
Yes.
I can't even imagine. I'm glad we got these memories because when this came out the first time, like, even just saying, like, oh, when we finally got our generation Star Wars trilogy later, it's not the same as when it first came out, like, you've never seen any of this stuff before.
Yeah, that's, I think, the biggest thing is like no one had seen something like this, the effects or the story.
Mm-hmm. So one more memory that a friend shared with us, quote, I was invited to go with a neighbor family. I was 10. I thought it was really cool and I thought Luke was cute, but R2-D2 was my favorite character. He was the coolest thing ever, but that's not true because the lightsabers were actually the coolest thing ever. I got bored during some of it. That whole X-Wing part with the orange glasses was long and I had no idea what was going on at that point, LOL. I didn't really follow the story that much because it was like, what is that? What is that? To every little thing. I was 10 and had really only seen maybe 3 kids/Disney movies in the theater before this. The visuals and sounds were the coolest thing for me. I can remember coming home with my friend and her brother and us all playing in her room pretending to use lightsabers and make their noises, and also that staticky breathing noise of Darth Vader. We were all so excited and thought it was all so cool. Everything from their clothes, the slanted scrolling word graphics at the beginning, with the bombastic intro music, R2 and C-3PO, droids in general, the Millennium Falcon, multiple suns, Chewie, Han, and Leia, the red-eye critters, Leia's digital message, the strange non-human characters, interplanetary travel, the Force, 3 exclamation points, the stormtroopers, the pew-pew weapon sounds, and the funny Cantina band were all cool and unusual things we had never seen before. It was awesome. Also, the Cantina song was on the radio constantly, top 40 hit.
Nice.
That I did not know, and that is also my favorite song from the Star Wars movie.
I did not know that either, but I have a little fun fact, because if anybody here is fans of Family Guy spoofed the entire Star Wars. It made it into a cartoon, and anyway. In the cantina scene, they have 5 people playing in the cantina, but in the movie, there's only 4. That's my fun fact. I don't know if it's fun or not, but
it is. That's a fun fact. Is it like a full-length movie?
It is the same exact movie. It's just, instead of it being Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, it's
Family Guy style comic.
It's the characters from Family Guy.
Whoa.
So like,
I've never heard of that at all. I have no idea that was a thing.
Han Solo is Peter, Leia is Lois, Luke is Chris, Brian is Chewie, Stewie is Darth Vader,
sure.
And Meg is the monster inside of the Death Star in the trash chute. That's the only time she appears in the movie. But
wow.
Speaking of, okay, but this is kind of cool because that is a huge reference to Star Wars in Family Guy. And how many times a day do you think people reference Star Wars?
Just people all over the world?
Yes.
I'd say probably something like every 5 minutes somebody references Star Wars or something like that.
Interesting. I'm actually not sure how often in one day.
Oh.
Sorry. But Star Wars has been a part of people's lives fairly often, popping up in TV shows, books, and other sorts of media. When asked on Reddit by someone from outside the USA how often Star Wars is part of the everyday life of Americans, or if it is really relevant in real life, here's what one Redditor, I guess?
Yeah, that's what they call them.
Okay, cool. Here's what one Redditor had to say in response. Quote, every morning I wake up to the John Williams song Dueling Fates before showering with Emperor Palpatine's foaming bubble body wash, dry off with a Mandalorian and Grogu themed beach towel, and brush my teeth with my Darth Vader electric toothbrush. I am 47 years old. I am the average American man. End quote. So while this is obviously an exaggeration, Star Wars is easily one of the most referenced movie trilogies, and in fact universes in our everyday lives. In movies alone, it appears in over 200 different movies starting in 1977, the year Star Wars came out. It was referenced in Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977. But here are some of our favorite movie references. So, Airplane 2, the sequel from 1982, the opening crawl text in that movie references the opening crawl text in Star Wars. And side note, Airplane, the original, also spoofed Jaws. Another reference is in this movie when the main character Stryker puts on the oxygen mask, he sounds like Darth Vader. In Back to the Future, this one's probably one that everyone has seen. Marty McFly references Darth Vader when he tries to convince his father to ask his mom to the school dance. He also references Star Trek in the same sentence, which is like a huge no-no. In Indiana Jones, throughout the franchise, there's multiple references. The most famous is in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and in one of the early scenes, a hieroglyphic engraving shows R2-D2 and C-3PO on a wall.
I love that.
So, yeah, I love that one too. For a complete list of references in movies, though, look to our show notes. We'll link the article in there.
And we didn't even mention Spaceballs, which the entire movie is a spoof.
True.
What year was that? That's the 80s, I think.
I think so. Because it's right before Rick, whatever his last name is,
Moranis
stopped.
retired.
Yeah, Moranis, thank you. Retired.
Yeah. And it's not just in movies and shows that we see Star Wars pop up. The movies are so much a part of people's lives that in the UK census of 2001, 390,000 people marked Jedi as their religion, making it the fourth largest religion surveyed on the census.
That's how does one even practice that religion, I wonder?
I think these are all just atheists who are also nerds, and they just wrote that down. I don't think anyone really practices. Well, I don't know. Let us know. Reach out to us in our DMs if you know anyone who actually is a practicing Jedi.
Yes.
I would love
have
to
questions.
know that.
Yes. And the universe of Star Wars also makes its way into politics, if you can believe it. So this happened in the 80s. The US and the Soviet Union were involved in the Cold War. And the easy peasy behind it has to do with an initiative by President Reagan to use lasers and other weapons to protect the US from Soviet attacks. But critics referred to it as Star Wars. So President Reagan also referred to the Soviet Union as, quote, the evil empire, which some say is a reference to the evil galactic empire used in the film.
Maybe.
Yeah. And in 2008, CNN presented correspondent and musician will.i.am as a hologram during their broadcast of election night, which the world infamously called back to the opening of Star Wars with Princess Leia and R2-D2.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anyone will ever look at a hologram and not think of Star Wars, honestly.
Oh, yeah. And as soon as like holograms become like super common, there's going to be so many TikToks of people doing the hologram, and the audio is just going to be
help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes.
Yeah, it sure is.
Some other cool ways that Star Wars impacts our lives today. In 2007, Shuttle Discovery launched Luke Skywalker's lightsaber into space to celebrate and commemorate the 30th anniversary of their franchise's beginning.
Cool.
Yeah. Regarding robots, droids, there's a real-life R2-D2 in the International Space Station. It does not look like R2-D2, but it's a humanoid named Robonaut 2, which is sometimes called R2. And it's intended to flip switches, do simple experiments to free up the astronauts' time so they can focus on harder things.
That's cute.
Yeah. And also in 2006, NASA launched a set of droids that are aware of each other and can fly in sync to avoid crashing into each other. And this is similar to the little small droids used for lightsaber training.
Neat. There's also something called the Star Wars Celebration, which is a convention and ultimate fan experience event filled with major announcements, immersive exhibits, and an interactive show floor, screenings, merchandise, celebrity guests. You get it. The first event was held in 1999 in Denver, Colorado. The most recent one was held in Orlando in April of 2023. The next Star Wars Celebration is in this April, 18th through 20th, and will be held in Japan.
And here's a fun fact regarding the Force, right? The number of times the Force is mentioned in all Star Wars movie, which, by the way, there's 11 live action movies in Star Wars, right? George Lucas gave us the 6 movies between 1977 and 2005. So the original 3 in the original trilogy, and then the prequels. And then Disney takes over, and we get 5 more movies plus endless TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
So the word "the Force" is mentioned 171 times across all 11 movies.
Wow.
The most would be, thankfully, in Star Wars, the OG film, which gets renamed A New Hope, and also in Rogue One, a Star Wars story from 2016.
Yeah, and that movie mentions it 46 times.
Yeah, it's insane. So it seems that Star Wars is such a massive part of American culture that I would classify it as Americana.
Yeah, I would too. It's honestly, and we've barely scratched the surface in this episode. There is a lot to dig into, even just trying to stick to the first movie. There's a lot of stuff we skipped. So if anyone wants more Star Wars content, reach out and maybe we could actually just do Star Wars Part 2 with all the stuff we deleted from this outline. So
True. Or a watch along.
Or yeah, that would be fun. But I think it's such an important thing. It's mid-century adjacent. And I'm glad that we covered it. So hopefully everyone had fun, because I know we did.
Yes.
Putting this episode
We
together.
Definitely did.
But anyway, now that we're caught up to the present, it's time for our etiquette segment. So Gonzalo, what do we have today?
So, yes. So because we're talking about Star Wars, for whatever reason, I connected with like teenagers in the 70s. So maybe it's because in TV we always see people like the kids in Stranger Things or It talk about media, including Star Wars. Or maybe because people like Ross Geller and friends who would have been teenagers in the 70s were big into Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So today's etiquette tips come from Avi Vanderbilt's Complete Book of Etiquette from 1957, chapter 55, the teenager.
Ooh, fun. Cool.
Yeah. So regarding teenagers, Amy says that strictness is not a perfect answer to children's social problems. The teen stage is a difficult time, quote, when one is not quite on one's own, not altogether sure one wants to be on one's own, yet resentful of too much parental pressure and old fogginess, end quote.
Yeah, that's accurate still.
Still, as in like teenagers today, or still
I
as
mean,
in
at least
us?
when I was a teenager, I find that relatable. Like, you're not quite an adult yet, but you're not really sure you want to be an adult yet, but you don't want to be, like, treated like a kid. Like, she summed it up pretty well.
Yes. Regarding teen drinking, Amy says there should be no place for alcohol in the lives of children. Though a boy or girl of 18 might be permitted a cocktail or occasional glass of wine to celebrate some event, but regular social drinking at this age should not be considered. So, quote, children usually look with great superiority on any observed inebriateness of their elders, end quote. So basically she's saying don't drink in front of your kids.
Mm-hmm.
She says that it might be too much to ask a young son to abstain from alcohol until of age if an example of insobriety has been set by his parents. Goes on to say that lectures on the evils of alcohol will accomplish very little, and that if they being the teenagers, have seen alcohol used at home, quote, as a pleasant controlled adjunct and never abused, they are likely to follow.
Yeah.
Regarding smoking may be a habit to children that signifies the, quote, wonderful state of being grown up. Most boys and girls experiment with at least substitute tobacco, so brown paper or corn silk, at age 12 or 13. Nothing much can be done about this except educating children about safe match use and keeping the odor outside, is what Amy says.
Well.
Yes. Basically, she's saying kids will be kids. And practice smoking. But this activity is followed sooner or later by experiments with real tobacco. Amy suggests when that happens, don't be strict about it. Here is a suggestion from Amy. This would be after a parent finds their teenager smoking. She says, quote, I see you've been smoking corn silk. It doesn't taste very good, as I remember. And then she goes, the child will be surprised at this admission. When you feel you must try your first real cigarette, tell me and I'll let you do it here at home. No, I wouldn't like you to smoke regularly yet for a great many reasons you're hearing in school. I would like you to wait until you're 18 or maybe even until you're 21. And of course, I wouldn't be displeased once you tried it if you decide not to be a smoker at all. Lots of people don't smoke and manage to get along very nicely. But if you do smoke, I hope you'll be moderate about it so that smoking will never be a serious problem with you.
Aw.
I know, very, very nice about it.
Yeah.
Regarding makeup and permanence. And as a side note, when I read this chapter, my first thought was tattoos, not perms, because it said makeup, and I figured it was etiquette about makeup on girls and tattoos on boys.
Aw. Bless your heart.
Anyway, Amy says, let a child be a child. She says that children are usually willing enough to be their age. They don't necessarily want a permanent wave at 10 or want to use too much makeup at age 13. Permanents are inappropriate until late teenage years. And Amy says, as are dark nail polish, very obvious lipstick, powder base, rouge, and all but a quote dusting of powder. So what do you think?
I like it. I mean, I kind of don't hate any of this, honestly. It's mostly kind of pretty level, like lead by example. Don't get too strict and weird because you'll scare them off. Seems like pretty good advice. So that's my feels. I kind of like all of these.
Yeah, I'd like to. I think they're more like guidelines, maybe for like parents of teenagers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm okay with giving them the stamp of approval. I will say though, I don't think they're etiquette tips for teenagers. I think they're just guidelines.
Yeah, I think it's
That's
more
my
like
opinion.
how to deal with your teenager now that you've gotten to this chapter of the etiquette book.
Yes. Cool. Well, it looks like we have landed the plane, or maybe I should say the Millennium Falcon. Thank you guys all for listening today. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show and tell a friend.
You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. This is the best place to send us feedback and episode suggestions. Send us a DM anytime.
Yep. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you again next week, and may the 4th be with you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mid-Century Living. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave a review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. See you next Friday.